Okay, I think it changed us. Um,
Yeah, that link was dead. It
yeah,
had a one
yeah,
minute clip of your last one.
yeah. It's because I
Accidentally ended it.
yep. Let me get rid of the. All right, let's see if that's working as intended. New link, so you'll need to repost the old link. All right, people are migrating over. Excellent. Can y'all hear me? Are we good to go? Excellent. Excellent. Well, after a few, what I'm going to call minor errors, we are here. We're ready. We're live. Ethan, would you like to say hello?
Hey, everybody. Great to be here. Great to be with Mr. Rook. I know we've known each other a long time, so excited to collaborate on this streaming session and walk through some of the challenges.
Yeah, it's super weird that I haven't had you on the channel before. I don't know why that is, but I'm glad to have you here now. Ethan and I have been on CTF teams together. We have been good friends ever since. It's one of those magical friendships that you make in this weird world of cybersecurity. And um, despite only seeing each other once or twice a year, I think we're pretty good friends. So, why we're here today, though, is a company called Ironwood Cyber that Ethan is a senior member of, has decided, like, taken it upon themselves for some reason to do a bunch of extra work for essentially free. Design DefCon badges, which is a community in and of itself, as well as associate CTFs with those badges to get those badges and compete for them. So we just had yesterday a Mini-CTF for the pre-con event, of which I wrote a couple challenges and Ethan wrote a couple challenges. So we're going to do a walkthrough today. But first, I just want to ask, what were you thinking? Why in the world would you decide to do all this stuff?
To be frank, it was kind of a no-brainer for us. We've been a part of the DEF CON community for a number of years. We love the badge life community in particular. A number of us, you've probably seen us before at past DEF CONs with about 10 badges around our necks. We just love being a part of the maker community. We love building. We love giving back to the community. And we love having fun and kind of sharing our love of what we do with everyone else. So it's honestly a privilege to be able to do this, and it's even better if the community enjoys what we're doing. So again, just thrilled to give back, and it's a great time to join and be part of badge life.
I agree. And I mean, I've had quite a few badges throughout time. And frankly, I mean, last year's reactor badge, arc reactor badge was incredible. And I'm really looking forward to, if you haven't seen the hype trailer on Twitter yet, I've reposted it and a few people have posted it, but this year's crest badge looks, I mean, exponentially prettier and more complex. And it seems like you guys just level up every time.
Awesome. Love to hear it. Love to hear the feedback. It's awesome.
Yeah. So let's dive in. Let's start talking about the CTF a little bit. So the pre-con CTF is an opportunity for your community to get together, compete a little bit, learn some new skills or some new techniques, and also qualify ahead of the con to get one of these badges. So this time around, we put together 4 challenges. There were 2 kind of Linuxy challenges that I wrote, and then you put together a Pcap challenge and a web challenge as well. And so I should have prepped by having the CTF site up. Let me get that up real quick. Okay, so here are, close the tab. Let me make this a little bit bigger for folks in case you're watching on a small screen. So this is the MetaCTF platform, and my understanding is that they did this for you like pro bono, right? Like they also wanted to give back to the community, and so they hosted your CTF for free, but this is their jobs. They normally charge to run CTFs for people. That's right.
Yep, that's right. They were awesome. We actually met them during Wild West Hackin' Fest this past year. We participated in the CTF there, just had a blast, and love their platform. So we, when we were thinking about doing some of the pre-con challenges as well as the during con challenges, we we reached out to them and asked, hey, would you be able to help us out? And they jumped at the chance. It was great. Good folks. The platform is amazing. As I'm sure you all can attest, those that got a chance that have had a chance to play one of the MetaCTF CTFs, they typically run some Flash CTFs monthly and other fun activities for the community. So they do a great job, and yeah, was just thrilled to have their help in doing this. Also setting up the challenges as well, setting up the infrastructure.
Yeah, and just to clarify, if you haven't tuned into my channel before, and I wouldn't blame you if you hadn't, it's been a long time since it's been active, but I don't do sponsorships. I don't have like paid ads or anything like this. This is I'm all about the community, and MetaCTF has just been stellar in the community. I've met Roman, who runs that group, a couple of times. He's been running the Wild West Hackin' Fest CTF for several years now, and genuinely keep an eye out for them. Watch for their Flash CTFs. It's always a good time just to kind of jump in for, they run them for an hour or two, and it's a great way to kind of keep your skills sharp or learn new things. But I think that's enough non-sponsored sales talk. But let's jump into one of the challenges. So this is the first time we'd used this platform, so we didn't quite do what we were expecting to do, but I was expecting the Linux challenges, the lab challenges, to be up front. So we'll start with those because I think they're kind of the most straightforward and easier to walk through, and then we'll get to what I consider the back half. But I do know, because they were in this order, I think a lot of people did kind of solve them in this order. So let's start off with which one do you think is the easiest one? You think the Tmux is the most straightforward one?
Yeah, personally, I think and that's, I think, based on the solves that we saw too.
Yeah.
The Tmux one, I know, from my time and working a lot in Linux and doing a lot of development, Tmux has been a big part of like my administrative level tool set. And I know same with you, Rook. And so it was definitely something when I tested it out, it it was more familiar to me than the SSH one, which we'll go over in a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who are not familiar with Tmux, you should be, first of all, but I'll just run it on my local terminal here first. You'll see this a lot in my other videos. If you ever go back and look at all my Hack the Box videos and stuff, you'll always see this green bar down at the bottom. And what this allows you to do, if you come out of the old Linux administration world, you're used to typing add a server and you have no GUI and you just have one terminal available. So this allows you to run multiple terminals. So you can split your terminal screen like this and have multiple terminals in one window. You can also, font bigger. Absolutely. Let's do that. Is that readable? I know I'm running 4K here, so sometimes it can be a little rough on the stream. Is that better? Let me know. But But this allows you to create multiple windows, so I can go back and forth between these two different windows. I can move around these different panes, and I can type in this pane and type in this pane, etc. So it's super helpful just as a generic administration tool. The other cool thing about Tmux, and this is what we're about to abuse in a minute, but if you have a long-running task, but you're SSH'd into another server, or you're remotely managing or something like that, you want your task to continue running without having to stay logged into SSH, without being logged into that computer. So you can use the prefix key, which by default is Control B, and then D is the command to detach from that session. And the cool thing is it just Tmux LS? Yeah. The cool thing is you can leave all those sessions behind. And if I were SSH'd in and exit from here, that Tmux session would still be there. The concern about doing something like this is what we're about to abuse in a minute. So let me reattach to my session. And if you noticed, let's just back up a second. If you noticed, I ran the Tmux and A for attach. You can shortcut Tmux commands, and then I targeted the 0th session here, and I got back into my Tmux session. So let's look at the challenge. Okay, so this challenge is basically an admin used to is adminning a site, but he's very forgetful and loses access to their server all the time. And in this case, they have lost access to their root command, or their root shell. So they think they left a backdoor, they couldn't remember, but they need help getting back into their system. So let's SSH in to this challenge. This is a really cool bit of automation from the MetaCTF folk. Oh, is it down? Wait, what? What is happening? Is DNS down for my system? Okay, well, let's try it from here. Can you guys still hear me? Ethan? Is this all still working?
Yep, I'm good here.
Are you able to hit the challenges? I can run these locally, but I just wanted to hit them. Is it just really slow? Oh,
I can hit the server itself.
We finally got it. Yeah.
I'm not sure about those SSH ones.
Maybe the containers like weren't
okay.
Like Kubernetes wasn't like hot because it's been a while or something. Anyways, coming back. So this is a neat bit of kit that MetaCTF does. So they can actually host containers and spin up a unique container for every person as they SSH in, which is super nice. Because when you're writing CTF challenges, and Ethan, I'm sure you've run into this, but you have to be really deliberate with what you gain access to, or what you grant access to inside the CTF challenge, especially if there's going to be multiple people in there. For instance, this challenge gives you access to root, meaning that once they privesc, they can delete the flag, they can kill the session, they can, you know, mess up whatever vulnerability you've set and like patch vulnerabilities and stuff. So giving everybody their own unique container is super, super helpful. And we actually ran into a problem with that in the web app challenge that I'll have you talk about when we get there, Ethan, in testing, not during the event, thankfully. But so here we are. We're inside of a container. We're on a Linux box. This is kind of where I live and breathe personally. A few of the things that I tend to do. Now, this may be a little confusing because you see the green bar down here. Don't worry about the one green bar. There will be a second green bar later. But the first thing I do when I kind of log into a box, whether I am there is an admin, there's a security defender, there is a red team or OffSec person. I kind of go through my who, what, when, where, why. And not every single one of those is relevant every single time, but who am I? What are my rights? What are my privileges? What is running? How did I get here? What am I trying to do? Et cetera, et cetera. So the first thing I'm going to do is I can see a username here, and I know that I am on NodeCaf, the host, but I don't necessarily know if that's accurate or not. So I'll run ID and I'll run hostname just to kind of get an idea of what's going on, see if my prompt is telling me the truth. This is pretty standard. I'm the admin user. My default group is admin. I'm also part of the operators group and the users group, which makes sense to me. Operator is oftentimes used as kind of a different admin group. It can be used for slightly kind of sub-admin sometimes, where they need certain access to privileged commands or data, but they don't need to be able to operate the the kernel or the operating system itself, kind of stuff. So that's fine. Let's take a look at my home directory. Normal stuff, nothing there. Sometimes you'll get documents or saved things from the user. We do see a bash history file, so I'll run history just to kind of see what's been ran before. Nothing really has been ran before here, which is, is what it is. Let's do, let's also run a PS. And my particular flavor of PS is PS AUX. If you ask 1,000 Linux admins what their PS format is, you will get probably close to 5,000 different answers. But my default is PS AUX. Some old BSD folk might be like PS ELF all the way. Whatever, it's just the way your muscle memory works. So I'm looking at the process tree, and I notice that there's entry.sh, which is pretty common for containers. That's not too much to pay attention to. Plus, we're not root, so we can't look at it anyways. We do see a Tmux new-d, which if you're familiar with Tmux, this is a giant kind of signpost saying, like, look over here. But if you're not, you may pass that by. We also see a Python script called gannon.py running on localhost and 4444, which is interesting. We may want to take a look at that. And then we see our bash prompt, our shell, and then this is probably another container thing. In fact, I am aware that's another container thing because I have that just to keep the container up. So let's think about stuff to look at. The first thing I think that's glaringly obvious, if you've ever used Metasploit before, 4444 is the common interpreter shell endpoint. It's generally something that shouldn't be there or is bad. Let's take a look. Do we have netcat? We do have netcat. So I'm just going to netcat to localhost on 4444. Just to take a look. Maybe this is the backdoor that the admin was talking about. And we see that, in fact, the backdoor is in another castle. So this is not what we're looking for. Just as a bit of trivia about how I write CTF challenges, I get really frustrated when I'm doing CTF challenges, and I don't particularly like spending a lot of time going down a rabbit hole and finding out that it was a red herring and it has nothing to do with that. So if I do put red herrings anywhere, they're generally pretty apparent almost immediately. That is not the direction you should be going. I know that a few people got tripped up on that because they don't trust me as an individual, and that's fine. You don't trust me and you waste your time. That's all good. But it is good to be thorough, but this was pretty clearly go look somewhere else. So the only other thing that's running on the server really is Tmux. And maybe another kind of situational awareness thing that I'll run sometimes, mostly for CTFs, not for like red teaming or anything, because it's pretty noisy. But I'll run like a find command. And what I really like running find on is not names of files, but writable. And sometimes I'll do readable as well. But if I find things that are like writable, it gives me a good sense, like, are there scripts that I can overwrite and maybe cron will run, or are there various files that I get access to that maybe I shouldn't have access to. And find can be pretty noisy output wise, so I'll just output all of the errors to devnull. And if I'm looking through, like, there's a lot of there's There's a lot of proc stuff, which is fine. Oops. There's like var temp and var lock. Those are just system directories. We come through, excuse me. We come through and here's my home directory. That's common. We do see a tmux-0 directory with a default file in it. So let's take a look at that and see what that is. And we see that this S denotes that it is a socket file and it is owned by the root user, and the operator group has read and write permissions on it. Sockets are very interesting, and the SSH challenge also has a socket. So this is, I think this is useful information to kind of be aware of. Sockets in Linux, since all things are files in Linux, sockets can be network connections, they can be inter-process communication challenges or channels, all kinds of different things. If we have read and write access to the socket as a user, we can use that socket. A little bit of background on Tmux. Tmux uses sockets for this, but inside Tmux, they call them servers. And a Tmux server is the thing that spawns sessions. So when somebody runs Tmux, they set up a new server, and new Tmux sessions can be attached to that server. It appears that we currently have access to this Tmux server because we have read-write access to the socket, and that's typically good enough. And if we run PS again, just to kind of see what's running, we will notice that this server is being ran by root. So this is a pretty heavy indication that maybe we can poke at this. So we will run tmux. Now, the attach command that I ran earlier is for attaching to a detached session. If we want to create a new session on a different server, we can run, actually, let me do this. If we do man tmux, and we look at the -S, option here, we can set a path to an alternate server socket. So instead of creating our own server in Tmux and creating a new session in that, we will specify a different server that we want to create a new session on. So we will, let's keep that up. So we will run tmux -S temp tmux -0 and then default. Now, how do you know to look in temp? Well, there's a few ways. One is that search command, the find command that I ran earlier. If this container had like LSOF, you could run list open files and see what process has what files open. But Tmux default, by default, when you create a new server, it creates it in temp, tmux dash, and then the user ID of that user. And then default is the default socket name for any new Tmux server. You can change that name, but by default, it's just default. So when we run this, you'll notice we get a second Tmux bar down here. This is just Tmux within Tmux. It's turtles all the way down. But this bar is for the server itself. And you'll notice that we're running as root. So if we run ID, inside of this Tmux session, since it's root server, we are running as root. And we can list the flag.txt, and we can see that we have read and write access to it. Now, as per all of my streams and videos, I won't actually cat the flag. If you want to check it out, I believe these challenges are going to be up for another couple days. You can log in and do it yourself, and you can find the flag, but I will not put it on the stream, even though the CTF is over and you can't score anymore anyways. But here we are. That's the first challenge. So I'm going to pause my presentation like a little bit, so if people want to ask questions, they can. But Ethan, I want to talk to you just like a kind of quick question about like how you got into, because we met through CTF ages ago, but how did you kind of get into CTFs? Like what brought you to that culture and that hobby in the first place?
Yeah, gosh, you know, it's an interesting story. So we, a couple of the folks at Ironwood Cyber that have been involved with the badge and have really, you know, been the brains behind it. So Jose and Sean and some of the other folks, I've known them for, gosh, I think 10 years now. And so when I was just getting into cybersecurity, I was really looking on, you know, how can I build my technical skill set in it? And especially in areas where I had just kind of gotten interested in some of the more technical aspects of cybersecurity. You know, I started out mostly doing kind of information assurance, compliance type stuff, kind of, you know, on the GRC track, so to speak. But I was always somebody that loved doing the technical side, loved diving into problems that are involved, and loved learning about all the different aspects that go along with that. So I kind of started out with some forensics courses at the company that I was at the time. Went through a course to kind of do, you know, look at packet captures, for example, look at covert communications channels, try to identify those based on, you know, artifacts that have been left around from disk images, memory images, packet captures, and so forth. I loved it. Immediately, I knew these are the kind of tracks that I wanted to go down. And when I met Jose and Sean, they were already doing quite a bit with SANS and doing quite a bit with both taking courses and then also participating in Net Wars, which is kind of their capture the flag capstone event as part of most of the conferences that they run. They tend to have Net Wars that goes along with it. At that time, they had the base Net Wars. They've since you know, spun that off into several that kind of focus both on kind of all around, you know, blue team and red team and penetration testing types of challenges. But then also cyber defense. There's the digital forensics and incident response variant of Net Wars. So there's just a lot out there in terms of building your skills, depending on what track you really wanted to go down. But I started doing that. I signed up for a SANS course, was fortunate enough to get the company I was at to pay for it. So I went down there and tried Net Wars for the first time, and I was both completely overwhelmed and completely hooked at the same time. And it was the most wonderful feeling, also the most frustrating feeling. But what has kept me coming back to capture the flags has been just the overall, the raw excitement that you get when you've struggled for so long to solve a really challenging problem, and then it just finally clicks and you do it. Yeah. And it's such an amazing feeling. It's also amazing to look back on your journey in terms of, you know, capture the flags, building your skill set, and how that helps you in your career. It helps you be resilient, you know, no matter what type of challenge you might face. And also I found that I learned as much, if not more, from all the things that I tried that didn't work versus the things that actually did work. And so I've applied a lot of that over the years to the methodology that I take in, you know, solving problems and capture the flags, but also solving problems in the industry as well. So, you know, when we're on a penetration test, a lot of these things, you're going to see them out in the wild. Same thing if you're, you know, a defender, you're going to see some of these things in the wild. And, you know, that muscle memory from doing capture the flags is really amazing. And I love that we've got such a wonderful community in cybersecurity that is really big on capture the flags. That's personally how I learn best.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it gives you the ability, like, you can read all you want, right? But it gives you the ability to kind of cut your teeth on it and put theory into practice. And I mean, like I said, you and I have met through CTFs, which I think kind of the underrated like benefits of CTFs is like meeting other practitioners. And man, when I first started doing CTFs, I didn't want to participate in a team because like I wanted to do it all. Like I was there to learn and grow. But I wish I would have gotten into team-based CTF a lot earlier because you learn from each other, you teach each other stuff. Beyond CTFing, teaching is probably the most, like, the thing that improved my skills the most, and like mentoring other people. So it's all this kind of huge virtuous feedback loop for sure. Another interesting thing,
Absolutely.
right before I get to the next challenge, when I met you guys doing CTFs, you all were developers, right? Like, you weren't actually like offensive practitioners yet, professionally. Do I remember right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. That's true. I came from kind of a little bit of a varied background. I did some software, but I was also doing a lot of integration and test work. I was doing some systems engineering type of work, and as a result of that, a lot of the testing work was heavy on systems administration and a lot of that Linux focused skill set, which really helped me out, in breaking in at first, and at least being able to kind of get my feet wet and some of the capture the flags and kind of building my knowledge from there. And then Jose and Sean were heavy into software engineering, both kind of enterprise software engineering, but also embedded software engineering. They do a lot with on that side of the house with real-time operating system development and those types of things, which coincidentally has helped quite a bit in badge development as well. So it all has kind of come full circle.
I was just gonna
doing some of these things.
Yeah, I was just gonna bring that up. I'm sure it helps a lot. I know you guys have been working really hard the last couple of months on it, and I'm sure that embedded programming helps. But I think you bring up a really good point. Like, I think a lot of people are curious about the security industry, or are like kind of adjacent to the security industry, and they may participate in CTFs, or they may go to DEF CON or watch talks online, but they don't feel like, they don't have a security training background, or they don't have a security background, so they don't feel like they can make that leap. But I mean, I still consider myself a Linux admin first and a systems engineer first, versus, even though I've been running offensive teams for 7+ years now, like, my background in systems administration and systems engineering guides almost everything I do. And one of my other good friends also comes out of development, and he uses that development background every day. So I think, if you're on the edge, or you're thinking about it, or, you don't know if you're qualified yet, just like, CTFs are that gateway for sure. But start making friends, start introducing yourself to people in the industry, and you can make that jump if that's something you want to do. You guys were the best hackers I knew for a long time, and you weren't even professional hackers. So I use you guys as examples all the time.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's one of the other things I love about cybersecurity, is just how diverse everybody's background is. So, when you're talking with someone, another industry professional, whether it's, competing in a CTF or elsewhere, it's awesome to hear their backgrounds and the knowledge that they have that you can kind of soak up, because everybody's got, I'm like you, I still use the same Linux commands that I learned 15 years ago.
Yep.
When I wasn't doing cybersecurity all the time. And it's awesome that, we can kind of come into the industry with different perspectives, with the diversity of all those perspectives, and ultimately become experts, in cybersecurity in our swim lanes, where it's really it all kind of comes full circle from what you've done in the past. So
yeah,
cool.
And like, we'll get back to challenges in just a second, but my real quick hot take that I'll drop and then move on is, like, when you get down to brass tacks, like, there's really no such thing as security as an independent thing. It's just whatever that discipline is, really, really good. So, like, there's no admin security. It's just being a really strong admin and knowing how to configure things well and making sure that things function the way they're supposed to be. Or there's no, like, software engineering security. It's just, as a developer, understanding, like, that you need to make sure you're protecting against bugs and that you're setting access controls correctly, etc. These aren't just to prevent attackers from getting in, but it's to increase the user experience and make sure that things run well and have good uptime and good responsiveness. And that's all really just engineering. So as much as I hire security people, like at the end of the day, I hire really good admins, I hire really good developers, and the security kind of comes with that. Dead Like You, I see you asked how we spawn the containers on connecting. We don't. That's a feature of the MetaCTF platform. So that's something we got by working with them and the MetaCTF folks. So, I mean, there's, numerous ways to do it. I'm not sure how they do it.
I believe, at least at a high level, I think they're using Kubernetes to.
Yeah.
Basically, they've got kind of a front end server, and then they're dynamically spinning up containers, which is an awesome way to do this.
Yeah.
And very effective, especially for this, where you can have your own isolated session and work on it in that setting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they do use Kubernetes, but on the background, I'm not sure what that kind of front end middleware software that they are using. I think they wrote it themselves. It seemed pretty. I knew I was working with one of the guys on the back end to get the challenges deployed. So it seems like they've got their own automation set up for that.
Yeah, I believe you're right. Yeah.
I don't see any questions about healthy detachment, so I'm going to move on to apprentice and control. If you noticed, as people were working through this, apprentice and control, you go from dev to admin, and healthy detachment, you go from admin to root. I expected that more people knew about this SSH thing than the Tmux thing. I was incorrect, which is another reason I love running CTFs, is I get to learn right along with everybody else. So this technically was supposed to be the first challenge, but it wasn't though. So let's go ahead and SSH in. This might, oh, no, everything's back up. Cool. Okay, so I'm not going to go full into detail the way I did before, but the same kind of thing, like who are we? Where are we? If this was a network-based challenge, or if I was on an engagement, I'd look at network configurations, settings, and things like that. But this is pretty generic for a normal user. I don't have any interesting user groups. Excuse me. I don't have any interesting groups. I just have my one user. This is kind of the default way that users are made on a Linux system if you don't supply any fancy, configuration options or anything like that. So nothing fancy here. I can take a look at my home directory. I do see that there's an SSH directory here, so we can kind of ls that real quick. And we see known hosts. This just pops up when you SSH to other places. So this is probably not too interesting. But if we had like an authorized keys directory or file, or we had SSH keys in here or something, that could be an opportunity for pillaging and looting for a lateral movement. But so nothing really interesting there. We see history again, so we'll run history. There's me, just dropping a tag. But then there's also this man SSH config. So again, on minimized containers, there's no man command. If we weren't on a minimized container, basically I was trying to be conscious of how big the containers were, since I knew they'd be spinning up a lot of these. But let's go back to our other terminal real quick, and I'll do man SSH underscore config. And if you look through here, there's a lot of configuration options available for people to set up SSH automation or common configurations to hosts or things like that. I use this a lot. I know Ethan uses this a lot to set up hosts that we SSH to quite a bit. I use this file to set up Git configuration, so that when I clone repositories, it automatically uses my SSH keys and things like that. You can set up jump hosts and SOX proxies in your SSH config, all kinds of interesting stuff. If you're not familiar with the SSH config file, I would browse this, look up tutorials online, see how other people use it, especially devs and admins, because there's a lot of really interesting, useful information in here. I'm not going to browse the whole thing just because, there's a lot in here. But one thing I will point out specifically is that we've got a challenge named Apprentice and Control. There is a control master. Our job is to privilege escalate. So we're going to escalate from dev to admin, maybe escalate from apprentice to master here. But control master and control path, if you're doing more research into how this works and why this works, etc., these are the two configuration files and options. Sorry, not files. These are the two configuration options that you are going to be interested in. That is mostly just a pointer to help people looking at this understand that maybe they should be looking at SSH. If you run PS again, there's a lot of stuff in here. Oh, I'm on the wrong box. I was like, why is all that here? If we run PS AUX, you can see that SSH is running. There's also an Nginx directory. Again, this is just kind of to make sure that SSH wasn't the only thing running on the box and be too obvious that's the thing you're looking at. But if we like curl localhost, we can see that that this is a red herring. It says red herring. Maybe I didn't make that obvious since I said definitely no red herrings here. Maybe I should have put a /s on the end of that as sarcasm, but this is a red herring. This isn't anything to look at. You could, if you really wanted to, like go into the Nginx config and kind of see like what site is enabled. So we'll look at sites enabled, and it just points to the default site, which is a pretty good indication that like nothing weird's going on here. But we can even like we can cat the sites available default, just to kind of look and see if it's the default configuration, which it is. There's nothing weird happening here. Listening on port 80, looking at root var www HTML. We can like ls that directory, and there's literally just a static HTML file. So we've kind of ran that down. Unless you want to start looking for O-days in Nginx itself, which I would not recommend, we've kind of ran that down to the ends. So if we look at our process tree again, we can see that SSH is running. There is a line that points to temp sock, and there's this thing called mux. Now, I don't actually know. I should have checked. Do we have, oh, there's no like, oh.
You know, one of the things that was interesting when I was testing this out is noticing that mux symbol on the end.
Yeah.
Kind of helps you go down the path of SSH multiplexing, which will also kind of, you know, highlight the control master, control path, and the socket makes a little bit more sense from that perspective too.
I was just seeing in the man file if it actually mentions the word mux or multiplexing at all, which unfortunately it doesn't. That's a little odd to me, but you can, if you just like Google SSH multiplex, and like if you just, it's dangerous to just open random websites on a stream, but we're going to do it anyways. But if you look at like any tutorial about SSH multiplexing or muxing, you'll see like this control path and control master talked about kind of constantly. So that's, Ethan's right. The mux and the temp sock, anytime you see a sock file, a socket file, whether you're pen testing containers or you're pen testing pretty much anything, if you see a socket file in Linux, you want to investigate it and see what that's all about. So if we run ls on temp, we'll even just target the sock. We can see that it is owned by dev. So this is one of our sockets, and we have read-write access, obviously. Even if we didn't, since we own it, we could chmod it. But since we have read-write access, as I mentioned in the Tmux challenge, that gives you the ability to interact with the socket. So if we man SSH, if we man SSH and we look for like socket, let's see if that comes up. Oh, socket's going to come up a lot. If we just do this, we can see that we're able to specify a specific socket for use with SSH. If you read a bit of the config man page, or you looked up some tutorials, you'll know that control path is the path to the control master socket. And if us using all these terms doesn't make any sense to you at all, what control master does is it basically allows you to set up a single SSH connection and be able to reuse that connection with multiple other sessions without re-authenticating or anything like that. This was used a long time ago for automation and administration and development work. I have not seen it in the wild that much anymore. I will use it from time to time for persistence because I don't think it's that well known about. But that's also why I like to educate people about these functionalities, is because anything that exists but not a lot of people know about it is an opportunity for an adversary to use it and fly under the radar. So what we will do is go back to the correct session, and we'll SSH, we'll -s, we'll set the sock. Now this is where it gets a little interesting. So the way I have always done this is I learned that you have to add the username and destination to the command. This takes a little bit of guesswork because it's not a it's a privesc locally, and you're trying to get to the admin user. So if we run this, we become the admin user. However, what I found out while running this challenge is that people found out that if you use an existing socket file, the server will allow anything as the host name, and it just doesn't matter. So you can put a dot here and it will still authenticate over. So pretty much anything, if you're reusing the socket, it knows exactly where it's going, and you just need to give it some value in the host file. So here we are admin. And if we lsal the flag, we see that it is owned by admin, so we can cat this flag out if we want. Okay, so that is that challenge. Again, I'll kind of pause the walkthrough a little bit to talk with Ethan for a second, and also if you have questions, give you time to put in any questions about that, how it works, why it works, what it's used for, whatever you want. Ethan, you wrote the next two challenges. Have you written CTF challenges before? Kind of how did you do transition from CTF playing to CTF challenge writing?
Yeah, it was probably a few years after I first started doing CTFs heavily that I started creating challenges for them as well. Actually, back in the early days of Hack the Box, which has since exploded and become a real driver for CTFs out there and training. Great platform, by the way. I think Derek, you actually got me into Hack the Box first, and so, and then I got addicted and started solving everything. But I had a chance to do some for training while I was actually for work. We had some cybersecurity courses and coursework that we were doing. Ended up creating a couple of challenges for those just to have people kind of take home and work on various concepts on their own time. Also created one that has since been long retired, but it was called Jail on Hack the Box, which was quite a fun one to create and walk through a lot of Linuxy fun aspects to that one. If it's still up, the kernel is very vulnerable.
I'm pretty sure you can
created about
you can like dirty cow it, right? Like that's how old this is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. So it's I think I wrote it on CentOS, which is dead now. So
yeah.
But I just enjoyed it. Making challenges is, in my opinion, just as fun as solving. You certainly learn a lot about creating a pathway to get to an end objective, and kind of all of the steps that it takes to get to a point where a solution is reached.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I loved about it in creating challenges is making it really hardening it, and also ensuring that folks aren't going into rabbit holes and getting frustrated and so forth, and being able to make sure that also you don't have any super easy paths to get to the solution that you didn't think about, which in and of itself can actually be a good thing. I also found that in the collaboration process of creating a challenge and then having people walk through it, you may find 4 or 5 different solutions that people came up with that you didn't even think about as the creator, which I love, because I actually learned something from creating the challenge, which is amazing. So I would encourage anyone, if you're getting into CTFs and starting to get serious, creating challenges is just as much fun as solving them for me. And I learned just as much doing that as I did actually running through capture the flag exercises. So it was great.
Yeah, one thing that surprised me when I started developing challenges is how many steps and like how far out of your way you have to go through to enable some of these what are considered like fundamental vulnerabilities. Like the hoops you have to jump through to enable uh, user defined functions in SQL, or like all of these really random things that you think about, like, oh, these are every CTF needs this vulnerability, and you actually try and create that vulnerability yourself. And you just question why this vulnerability is so popular, because there's so many safeguards in place to not do this. And yet sometimes business has to have its way, and you just got to disable all the guide rails. But I think it gives you a better appreciation of like how vulnerabilities get created. You learn about misconfigurations. One thing I tell my employees that are on my offensive teams is, if you don't know how to build the thing, then you don't know how to break the thing. Like, just because you can come in with a wrecking ball doesn't mean that you understand what's going on. And if you don't understand what's going on, you can't write good reports. And our employers and our clients don't pay us to hack stuff. They pay us for the report. They pay us for the information that we're providing them. So learning more about how these things, not just how these things are broken, but how to build these things, I think is super, super important.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And one of the other things that we'll probably talk about this during the Node Cafe solve and walkthrough, but I've always been fascinated with normal functionality of software that can be turned around and potentially abused. And really, how do you protect against some of those things? How do you think about those things from an engineering perspective and from a design perspective? I've always loved that, because it's something that like you're mentioning, that's a real value, where a developer or an engineer may have a choice, and that choice is difficult, right? Of what settings do I put in place to make the system both performant, usable, and secure. And those choices, really do matter. And it's great to understand, how some of this functionality, while helpful from a usability standpoint, could potentially be used for malicious intent too.
Yeah. I mean, that just goes back to, like, there is no security. It's just like fancy admin, fancy dev work. Like, I'm writing a Linux class right now, and I'm not writing a hacking Linux class. I'm writing a Linux fundamentals class because I think it's really important that people understand the base principles of, the operating systems that run all of our software and our IT infrastructure. And even though the first module is like, here is the command line, here is how you run man, here's how you like use VI, here's how you list files, and here's how you script. At the end of the first module, there is a how this ties into security couple of labs, because even that level of super foundational computer work has security implications. And I think with university still, I mean, there are better programs today, but like to this day, like they just can't keep up with technology. So they're very heavy on theory, and they don't talk at all about enterprise IT or common development environments and CI/CD workflows, and how to install and run a Linux Apache server or Nginx proxy or whatever. And so what ends up happening is that these people that do go to university get a good theoretical foundation of computing and data structures and et cetera, which is great. I'm not trashing that at all. But then they self-teach or on the job learn all of these skills, and by nature that has a lot of holes in it. So I think people, as they kind of get into this stuff, really, even though it feels like I just want to get pen testing, oh, I just want to get into forensics, like when we won our first tournament of champions, like I still wasn't a professional. I think I barely started professional security for like a year, but I definitely wasn't an OffSec person yet. And really all that was is like y'all's very like heavy development experience, and like yours and I's heavy administrative experience, just knowing like here are all the mistakes I've done in the past. Here are all the terrible patterns that we do just to get the job done because we don't have enough time or we don't have enough resources or whatever. So if you know all the mistakes, yeah, if you know all the shortcuts that people take because it's their job, they have to do that. It's not like I've done this. If you know those, then you're infinitely better placed to take advantage of it and fix it, because ultimately our job is to fix things.
Yeah,
go ahead.
And I'll just say too, reading the manual and kind of being a lifelong learner, that's something that's always, I know, stuck with us. It's getting into a situation and being able to do enough research to be dangerous on the subject is very key.
Yeah. I joke that like as an OffSec person, you don't ever have the time to become an expert in anything. You just rapidly become proficient in stuff and then like move on. And if it's too long between doing the same thing twice, like I often have to retrain myself in something. Like if you ever ask me to write a buffer overflow, I'm useless at it. I can over a couple days reteach myself to do it, but since I never use it day to day, I just forget it every time. You mentioned Hack the Box, so I just checked while you were talking. I am user number 247 and you are user number 250 on Hack the Box. So we were there pretty
that lines up
pretty right at the beginning, and yeah, you were like I did a box and I was like, oh man, you got to check this out. Catching up on chat, Dead Like You pointed out that you can set control path in the SSH config file. So that's a good point. So the .ssh/config file in your home directory, everything that you do on an SSH command line plus some additional functionality, you can set in the SSH config. And you can actually set it up by host. I would show you one, but the only one I have is my personal one, and I don't know what's in there, and I don't want that on the stream. But like, trust me, even forget about the CTF challenge. Read the SSH_config man page. There is a lot of really cool functionality that you can set in there per host, per global. You can set up wildcards in the host. So if you have, like, I have a bunch of like PlexAmp and like Raspberry Pi endpoints in my house to stream music to different rooms, and they all have a prefix host. So I have a wild card for that, so I can SSH into any of my music players, and it has all the automation set up for that. So SSH configs, if you're going to spend any amount of time in Linux doing SSH, read up on that documentation. Everybody else is just talking about how cool Pcapception was, so let's jump into that. So let me download this. I'm going to download this to my desktop, and I'm going to so we ran into this a little bit. since it's coming from an HTTP site, some browsers get mad at it. You can just accept the download. But okay, so for this one, I'm going to close my terminal or minimize my terminal because I don't need it. I'm going to open 2 programs. Now, traditionally, a lot of people will do this analysis in Wireshark. I will do this not on a stream. They jump into Wireshark. That's totally fine. We were having this conversation yesterday during the CTF, but with massive Pcap files, it's a good idea to use something like either tshark or TCP dump or something to slice up and target specifically the data you want, and then you can bring it into Wireshark or something. But Wireshark really chugs if you like open like a multi-gig Pcap or something like that. Let me see if I can. Oh, I can. Maybe I need a Pcap open. But another program that I'm going to open is, where is it? Oh, it's in my downloads directory. Another program I'm going to open here is called Network Miner. I don't think there's a way to zoom this. I don't have my normal like streaming setup where I can just like use Windows to zoom in on a part of my desktop. I apologize about that. But we won't do anything too text intensive in Network Miner. But I wanted to point out, I did most of this challenge in Network Miner. There's a couple things I needed to do in Wireshark, but I used this program. If you're not familiar with it, download it, play around with it, because when you load a Pcap into it, it does a lot of the analysis that you would do in Wireshark for you. And again, I recognize that this is, can I actually, oh, this might mess up the stream. I was going to change the, oh, maybe I can do this. Let's just like increase the zoom. Did that work for everybody? Is everything bigger? Like, is this window now readable for folks, or at least more readable? I don't know how long of a delay we have here. Anyways, hopefully that was helpful. But when you load something into Network Miner, what it does is it pulls out files for you. It can pull out sessions. It can, you know, it shows you DNS requests, all kinds of interesting stuff. People are saying it's only a little bit better. Let me see if I can bump it up a bit more. Let's do like a full 200%. I mean, this should be 1080p at this point. So hopefully that's usable. If it's not, I can't go much bigger than that, or there will be no screen real estate. So I use this program a lot. We used this to great effect during the cyber defense net wars. In fact, I don't know if, by the way, you mentioned all those different net wars. I don't know if those are all still running anymore. I think Core and maybe one other is still running. But we use this. I use this a lot. This program's amazing. So I can, I can open this. That it has a bunch of directories that it sets up as it does analysis. So I can just open up the directory for this. I can take a look at, like, for instance, this XML or HTML page. And it's literally just something that says this file uploaded successfully. We can take a look. This is a Pcap, so I'll grab this. But the cool thing about this is it kind of shortcuts you to kind of what your objective is. It gives you a good overview of files that are moving back and forth. If you just need to grab like a malware sample or you know, evidence for some case that you're working on, this can be great for that. What it misses is the context. So if you want to open up the Pcap in Wireshark, you can get the context of the actual packets that are flowing. My first thing that I do whenever I open up a new Pcap unless I know specifically what I'm looking for. Like I did a packet dump for troubleshooting reasons or whatever. I always go into statistics and I look at the conversations just to see kind of what the different sessions are flowing back and forth, who between, how big they are, how much data was sent one way versus the other way, all kinds of stuff. Yes, Thomas, network miner would have saved you a bunch of time. However, there is a small hiccup with it that I encountered and actually cost me a bunch of time when I was testing this. But it is very useful. So I want to show it because it's good, but you need to understand the limitations and you need to understand multiple tools so you can use the right tool for the right job. Ethan, I don't know, is this something like, do you jump into the conversations first, or do you like kind of like, what's your first step when you like look at a Pcap?
Always. I mean, the conversations, especially it you know, it kind of depends on what the packet capture is for. If
Right.
it's for, you know, reconnaissance, for example, yeah, it's the first thing you do, right? Because you want to see who's talking to who, what's the volume of traffic, you know, when did it start? All of those things are really nice to have, and also breaking it down by stack like you've got here. So Ethernet level,
Yeah.
you know, layer 2, layer 3, and up.
Yeah.
Looking at all those things, it really helps you drill down, because like you said, if you're analyzing huge packet capture files, you have to start somewhere, because it's you know, it's the needle in the haystack, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, starting there and then drilling down is my preferred method as well.
Yeah, so we're gonna look at this. So I've moved over to the TCP. I know that the text has stayed small for some reason, but we were looking at the Ethernet, and as Ethan pointed out, you can look at the Ethernet, the IP, conversations by IP, and also TCP. This one is going to end up being the important one for this step. But in a CTF specifically, this is common in other potential use cases, but in a CTF, I look at TCP streams, sometimes UDP streams. This often is just DNS requests, which could be useful if it's a DNS cat challenge, or, you know, you're analyzing malicious DNS requests. But TCP streams almost always, and then I almost always start with the biggest stream first. Or if it's just like ungodly big for some reason, like it's like 8 gigs and you're supposed to be analyzing an image, maybe I won't. But generally I start with the biggest stream first, because it tends to be the most interesting, and then work my way down from there. So we will follow the stream. So I just click follow stream. And this just shows us the HTTP traffic here. And in fact, it shows us that there's some email stuff going on here. But we also see, so there's a take this Pcap, and there's also like a huge amount of base64 in here as well. Oh, you know what? This is interesting. Does this just allow you to skip like one whole step? I didn't do this challenge this way, so I may be wrong. Like,
yeah, so what I found, at least for this one, if you follow that stream, yeah, you could technically pull out
is this the zip file?
MIME content underneath. Yeah. Well, no, it's not the zip file. This is the second Pcap that's embedded in the first.
Yeah, but I think
nothing's encrypted.
No, but I think
see it.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. I think this right here is the zip in the other Pcap.
No, that one. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
But yeah, to Cooper's point though, it's a little difficult because you're going to see some extra noise from the packet, basically from the
fragmentation
of that large Pcap.
Yeah. But yeah, I was just curious because again, I did not do this mostly in Wireshark, so this is my first time seeing it. And yeah, I mean, yeah, you'd have to reassemble the fragments, I assume, and do some data cleanup, but you could probably have skipped the other Pcap analysis altogether if you knew what you're doing. It's faster though not to do it that way. So from here, is there like, Ethan, are you aware of a way that from the following the stream to just pull out the file? Let's see.
Typically, so if you go up to HTTP, yeah, so
This
go
one,
under
the
the
post?
MIME content and the
Mm-hmm.
encapsulated part
This
underneath
guy?
that. Yep. So if you keep going down, you'll find that there's raw data
And we can just
in the
export this?
encapsulated multi-part, and you can just export that as a file. So it's that data segment underneath. Yep. And so if you export the packet bytes, that is essentially the raw
Okay. So
the
these
file that was sent.
two should be the same then.
Yes.
Cool. Cool. Okay. So let's so what my next step was is I took this .pcap from Network Miner. I just threw it back in here. And if you have multiple pieces of evidence for a single case, you can load all of those into a single Network Miner session if you would like. And so this just kind of like layers the data on top of each other. But you know, you can open it separately or not if you'd like. But another example here is that we're now seeing credentials, which is interesting. So we see some POP3 credentials. This says master sword. It's a little blurry. It might not come through, but this says master sword. We're also seeing messages now. So there's some emails in here. So you can read the assorted love affair between Link and Princess Peach. They're scared that their significant others are going to find out, which is very humorous. That's a good little Easter egg, Ethan. I like this one. I didn't put much in mind because I was nervous that people wouldn't know the functionality that I was trying to highlight, but I really love like highly themed CTF challenges, and that's something that I think you did really well, both on this one and the Node Cafe. To answer Thomas's question, these are real world love letters that Ethan and I sent back and forth to each other, and we just changed our names to protect our love for each other in Hyrule. But no, I think you used like a language model for this, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
This was from the creative mind of ChatGPT.
And like, I'm not a huge fan of like LLMs in CTFs to like generate the code or to generate answers. I'm kind of okay, and this is just a personal preference. Don't think I'm judging anybody, but I'm kind of okay with putting in code snippets to have it explain it to you if you don't really know what you're looking at. But I find with CTFs, because I approach them for learning, not competition, I find that I learn more if I'm forced to go through it. However, generating filler and theme and stuff like that for CTFs, like language models, are fantastic for that. I think you used it really well. So I mentioned I was going to talk about where I got in trouble for using Network Miner, and where I kind of hit a roadblock is actually right here. So if we scroll down, we can see the base64 for the token.pcap. If you are familiar with the end of that file, or roughly how long that file is, it is much bigger than this. So I beat my head against this challenge for a little while because I was trying to stick with one tool and I wasn't familiar with the limitations of the tool, all of that kind of stuff. So I did run into a problem here. If you open it up in Wireshark, however, and we go back to, again, this is just my standard. This is what I do every time I open up a new Pcap. So we look at, let's see here. This is the big stream, so we're going to follow this. And we can go into the main window. And is it this retrieve? Is it the data? Is it the octets? Maybe this is it. let's show us the whole thing. Where did I find this?
I found the easiest way to get this is so if you're following the whole stream and you're looking at the conversations on
Yeah.
it, you can straight copy paste the base 64 from there and then use base 64 decode on the command line.
Right.
To carve it out.
That is exactly what I did at 2 in the morning. So we do follow TCP stream. And if we just scroll down here, we can highlight. And then we come down here and highlight. And then one thing you can do is if we go to like CyberChef. So what I did personally is I pasted this into a Linux terminal. I base64 decoded, redirected that to a file, and then did all that shenanigans. What I found out from somebody is that CyberChef, you can do this, and there is a save button here. So you can just directly save the output from a CyberChef recipe. And so if you've got binary here, you can just save this binary and we'll say that this is, I think it's take this.zip, right?
This one, I believe this one's another Pcap.
Oh, is it another Pcap?
As well.
Oh.
Yep. Yeah, token.pcap.
Oh, right. And then you get take this.zip. That's how. Spoilers, you get take this.zip. Oh yeah, that's exactly what it is because it's already in my downloads directory, which is not where I'm putting things for this challenge. Okay, so let's minimize this and I will put token.pcap back in Network Miner because it is my very favorite. So we see that there's another credential that popped up. We see Navi Hey Listen here. Something cool about Network Miner is that you can actually, from here, you can copy either the username or the password or copy all of it if you want. So we will need this password here in a minute. If we look in the files, we also see the listen.zip, so we can open this and bring this down. If we open it, it's going to ask us for... Is it because I've already decrypted it? Ethan, did you remove the decryption
Possibly.
section or
no, my guess is you
it's
probably
because I've already decrypted it. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know how to reset that in Windows, but if you try and open it, it will ask you for a password. We have gotten 2 credentials so far, so you could try and do something like John the Ripper if you wanted to. That's a pretty CTF-y thing to do, I guess, but this would not have johned very easily. Maybe you could use like mutation rules and whatnot. Oh, will Windows show you the contents without? Oh, it shows you the contents.
Does, yes.
That's awful. Yeah, oh man, encrypted zips are bad.
It shows you what's in it.
Yeah.
Is common for, even if zips are encrypted, you can see the
file
names.
See the file names. That's just super weird to me. All right. Well, here we go. Yeah, you got to watch your file names. Don't put all of your secrets. Don't be like the password to this file is this password or something as a file name. Okay, so we have 2 passwords here. This one came from this Pcap file though. And it's also an FTP password. Network Miner shows you kind of what the protocol is. So we're pretty sure it's this one. You could use both if you wanted. But I will use Hey Listen. And now it decrypts the crappy encryption for heylisten.pcap. Okay, so I'm going to continue my network mining shenanigans. And we dropped this in here. We got a few more things in the files area. And specifically, we have this SSL keylog, keylog.log. You will see that I already have this, so that's a 1 because I ran through this before. This is very important. This is a file. If you Google this file, it'll tell you exactly what to do with it. But this is basically pretty much, it is the necessary information to decrypt a TLS, TLS stream. So there's a specific way to get this into Wireshark. So let's open up listen.pcap. If we go into edit preferences, there it is. Protocols. A lot of the tutorials you'll read will specifically say to go to the SSL protocol. Modern Wireshark does not have that. It has TLS because SSL is old and TLS is new-ish. But we will go to that. We will add our pre-shared key here, which I will do the desktop one for consistency's sake. We will hit OK. What happens now with this Pcap file is, and maybe I should have shown this beforehand, but there still is some TLS stuff here. And if we just look at this, we see all kinds of jumbled crypto nonsense that we can't read. However, if we look at the decrypted tab here, this shows up when we import the SSL keylog.log file. We can actually see the raw HTTP now. There's a question, does Network Miner have the capability for SSL keylog.log? It might. To be honest, I have not looked. I will tell you that this is the free version. There is a paid version, which is like $1,200 or something like that. I am not familiar with what that capability is, but I don't see a way to easily without researching live on stream. It might be something to look into. It might be a feature of the paid version, but I don't really know. So we can follow this TCP stream, maybe.
Yeah, so once you do the TLS decryption, the HTTP protocol will show up.
Yeah,
which is
you have to
basically the key that'll allow you to carve out the objects that were.
Oh, I'm still following the wrong stream. So yeah, so here we can see the HTTP. Yeah, I had not, and I know you guys had talked about this a lot. I didn't run into this because I was using Network Miner most of the time, but that following TCP stream made it a pain in the ass. Close out of that, you'll see the HTTP conversations here. So if we run into conversations again, we should see port 443. We've got a couple. Where's the big one? Is it the 47K one? Must be this one. So let's follow that. Oh, it doesn't show you. That's dumb. Let's just grab the HTTP then. Where's the post? There it is. Okay, so we find the post. The post has a JPEG in it, and if we come down to the MIME information, we can right-click export packets by byte, and we will. This is, what's the name of this thing? Just working at my computer.jpg. And if we open this, you will see, if you don't know what Ethan looks like, this is what Ethan looks like. This is actually his desk. So, but clearly there is no flag here. there's a couple things that this could be. If you are a professional real world forensicator, then you may think of like Stego. If you are not, but you are a player of CTFs, you may think of Stego. If you are a player of CTFs, you might also think of EXIF data. So I personally dislike Stego in most CTFs. I don't mind EXIF data though, because I think it's something that people aren't familiar with. I think generally people aren't familiar with it. I think most security practitioners are, but it's a good reminder that, you know, every camera today adds a shit ton of data to all of your pictures and stuff. And it's important to know that that's there and how to clean it. Windows will show you EXIF data here in the properties. However, it will not show you the EXIF field that you need, which was frustrating to me. I don't know why I just opened Steam. Don't do that. Cancel. So what we will do here, oh my God, that's huge. Okay, so what we will do here is we will come to my terminal. We'll go to the Windows area. And I have EXIF tools, right? EXIF tools, yeah, installed. And this is just, I mean, it's not a thing special. This is just a way to programmatically command linely interact with the metadata of an image. So we will point it at that, and by default, it just prints out all of the EXIF data. And you can see like a lot of information here about, you know, kind of the camera settings, GPS location if that is included, color settings, all kinds of information. But you probably saw the flag down here, even though I usually don't show it on screen. But it was in the comment field of EXIF. Now, another way you can do this, you can just like run strings on the file. And if you like strings grep IWC, you can see the flag there. So this, like, the EXIF data is literally just ASCII in, or there are, if there is strings in the EXIF data, then it will just be ASCII in the binary file. Also, since you can strings it, you can grep minus IWC on just, oh, there's like a flag to make grep show the strings that it finds, but you can also grep it. That is that challenge. Any questions on that before we move on to the final challenge? And while we're letting the stream catch up, something we've kind of danced around a little bit, we've mentioned it once or twice, but haven't really talked about, is the challenge of creating vulnerable challenges that are just vulnerable enough to let the challenge work and let people learn, but not so vulnerable that people can ruin the challenge or stomp on the flag or patch the vulnerability or delete delete something crucial so that other competitors and other learners can't access the system anymore. So this challenge had one of those potential problems in it. As a challenge developer, can you talk about kind of your experience with dealing with this aspect of CTFs, like making things vulnerable, but only just vulnerable enough?
Yeah, and it's funny. It actually was in a couple areas, and one of which I caught about 3 hours before we were going live, and was improvising some changes. But one of the things, there's a couple steps in this that kind of revolve around. One of which revolves around some functionality that's a little bit too permissive. And on that piece, and I'll talk a little bit about GraphQL and some of the features involved as part of the challenge. But that was one piece that we had to harden, had to take away. So with GraphQL, you have the ability to issue queries for specific data types and fields. You also typically by default with a lot of the libraries that do the GraphQL hosting, you have the ability to issue what's called a mutation, which actually changes the data and will change it in the database if you provide the mutation type. So that's one aspect that we had to take away and kind of was unintentional at first, and then during testing they were like, well, yeah, you can overwrite the flag or overwrite the key to one of the parts with that. So obviously that's a no-no. So we removed that piece. The other aspect, which is very challenging, is anytime you're dealing with SQL injection in particular, and it's not simulated SQL injection, it's actual SQL injection for real. It's very difficult to harden around that. And anyone that's actually done programming of SQL queries and kind of understands the difference between doing a prepared query versus just sending in the raw string and all the things that developers might try to do to make that more hardened against SQL injection, very difficult to do. Prepared SQL statements obviously are the way to go in almost any case. Anything else, whether you're trying to do string escapes or quoting escapes, all of those types of things often end up still having vulnerabilities that you can get around.
Yeah.
So it's a tremendous challenge. And then on top of that, this SQL injection in particular was so bad that you could potentially do a lot of different things with respect to the database that was being used. So one of the things we did is kind of carve that off into a separate database so that there's really no way to jump from that SQL injection to anywhere else on the machine, or at least not easily. So you kind of having it constrained to a particular area of the challenge that you can kind of wall off from the rest of it. Those are good strategies to utilize. And also one of the other advantages, and really this has been over the last several years, and being able to do containerized challenges really helps with this as well, where you can take a database, for example, and kind of put it in its own separate container so that rather than having the database local to where the web service is, and somebody could potentially start, abusing a SQL injection to read files on the file system or do other things that are really even breaking out of the database itself. That's obviously much harder, if not kind of a non-starter, when you have a container that is only a database and nothing else. So it definitely makes it easier to make it more hardened. This was actually deployed with Docker Compose. For anyone that's not familiar with Docker Compose, it's basically, I kind of almost think of it as like a lightweight version of Kubernetes. It's gotten to the point where it's that feature filled, where you can essentially create a network of containers and a deployment of containers that allows you to do things like launch a container, set environment variables, connect containers together so that they are at least knowledgeable of each other from a domain name standpoint. Mm-hmm. So you could have a database that's named DB, you can have a web container that's named web, and if you give one or the other that domain name, it'll know, okay, DB is this host on the network. So it's really powerful, and it's nice to kind of create a little isolated network where you can expose only particular services doing that. So that's a nice way to create challenges as well.
Yeah. When I ran a couple B-sides for San Diego and Oklahoma a couple years ago, and every challenge was like Docker composed. Being able to kind of segment that and really kind of exercise micro segmentation helps a lot with preventing people from like rampaging out of control.
For sure.
Let's jump in. If I click this, it goes. Cool. Okay, so this is a website that is being put together by an entrepreneur that wants to combine their love of technology and their love of coffee Ethan's name, his handle is no decaf, but we have been giving him shit for ages that it's actually nodecaf, and he's really secretly a server-side JavaScript fanatic. So that's the kind of the how the sausage is made on why these things get named the way they do and what the theming is. But so we've got a web page. There's a couple things that I normally do when I'm doing web challenges that I will briefly like mention but not go too into, because I think it really overcomplicates this. And I only mention it so that other people kind of understand what other processes sometimes. So normally I'll set up something like Burp or Fiddler or some sort of proxy that I send all of my data through, so that I can see raw requests and network requests. I can mess with headers or cookies or anything else using that. But I didn't this time. Well, I started to, but this challenge really doesn't require anything like that. And so just to kind of keep this brief and not overcomplicate something that can get a little complicated, we'll skip all of that setup. One aside, I do all of that through Foxy Proxy so that I can very specifically and tactically send traffic to Burp or some other proxy without sending all of my traffic through that proxy. And it just keeps my proxy logs neat and avoids a bunch of, HTTPS warnings and all of that stuff. So from here, we've got this website. It's always important to look at the content of the website. We've got an interesting picture up here. It looks like maybe their logo. We can click on this and it just takes to the homepage. Great. We've got a bunch of coffee affiliated stock images, and we're told to watch, read, and listen. So this is a fantastic hint of trying to get the competitor to do something that I see a lot of people fail to, both in CTFs and on web penetration tests, is look at the website, look at the content, look at the functionality, learn how the website and everything is supposed to behave. This is critical, because I think in our industry, people get so caught up in binary exploitation and reverse engineering and super elite, like, template, server-side template injection. And it's just like whatever random, like quintuple order cross-site scripting or whatever. And they kind of lose track of what they're actually trying to do. What they're actually trying to do is find flaws in the business logic of the thing that they're attacking. And sometimes that is a result of some super deep arcane vulnerability that requires, forbidden magics and chicken bones to actually exploit. But a lot of times it's just normal bullshit that the admin or the dev either didn't notice or weren't thinking about or didn't have enough time, so they took a shortcut or whatever. So look at the web page, read the web page, understand what the application is supposed to do. In this case, if we hover over some of these links, they're just the # or hashtag if you're young enough. That all this means is if you click on this link, it's just going to reload the page you're currently on. This is very common in CTFs, so that you don't have to write all of these links, but it still looks like a normal web page. So none of these links are important. We do notice that this Enigma machine, if you're not familiar with what that is an Enigma machine. We see this image a couple of times. Maybe the owner of this company really likes Enigma machines, or they like antique cryptography, or they like World War II. Who the hell knows? Maybe it'll be important later. We will click the next link. We'll look at the About Us. This is, I believe you hand wrote all of this, right? This is your manifesto about coffee, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. I tend to go on writing streams when I get inspired.
Yeah.
This was also GPT. Sorry. And funny story about the watch, read, and listen piece of this too. It's actually part of the default template.
Oh, is it really?
I think it was 2024 in WordPress for a blog. and I was like, this is absolutely perfect.
That's
So
awesome.
I left it in there. And it was very appropriate to the challenge, as you said.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's appropriate to everything. I think, you know, people get so caught up in exploitation, and it's like, let's just kind of back off and think about how this is being used. But that's funny. I mean, that really points out that like inspiration can kind of come from anywhere, right? And that's both when you're writing CTF challenges or, you know, doing security or, you know, whatever. Just kind of be open to the things around you and be like, hey, that's a really good idea. Maybe we can do something with this. But this is interesting, I guess. I guessed at once that it was ChatGPT just because I know you didn't spend a bunch of time writing this, so I kind of disregarded it personally. But one thing that I didn't get naturally by doing this process this way versus my normal kind of web pen testing process is I don't get the raw page code. And I tend to generally absorb web applications that way. I'll do a lot of clicking around to kind of get a feeling for the flow and the different functionality of the application. But when I start doing analysis, I want to look at the code. So without burp, one way to do that is Control U, or you can right click and click get source or whatever. But I will do that. This is HTML with some JavaScript if you're not familiar. I am not one of those people that makes fun of people saying that their first programming language was HTML. Here is a interesting fact. My first programming language was HTML. Programming languages tell computers to do things, and they do them. It is not a compiled language. It is not a low-level language. It is not a complex language, but I think HTML is a great way for people to get started understanding that you can give computers instructions and you can tell computers how to behave. And it's not just magic under the hood. So, so we kind of scroll through this. We're looking. This is a lot of boiler template, WordPressy nonsense, CSS stuff, so a ton of CSS stuff. We've got some bog standard, you know, like JavaScript that's being brought in, JSON configuration. If you've seen a billion WordPress sites, you've seen a trillion WordPress sites. They're all the same for the most part, kind of up top. We can kind of keep looking through here, looking for anything that, you know, jumps out at us. And green is what you're looking for when you're using a browser to look at. Honestly, if you've got an IDE, comments are generally green. Comments are gold. This is true if you're doing source code analysis. This is true if you're doing web pen testing. You will be shocked the amount of nonsensical information that is given out via comments. So here we see that to legacy customers, we've got the old customer portal here. Old is always good for attackers. You shouldn't be exposing legacy code. There's a reason that it's legacy. You've probably done updates to it. So let's take a look at this.
I will say the other funny thing about HTML comments is that it always seems so contrived to have, you know, comments point the way, but I can't tell you how many times on a real penetration test for you know, for web where it holds true. Like the developer has left comments and is pointing exactly where the vulnerability is.
Yep. There's a
you should probably go look.
There's a to do, or there's a fix me, or there's a comment to another developer. A lot of times what I see happen is that there, like a CI/CD pipeline will be set up to, like if you're in a certain deployment environment, then you strip out comments, or you strip out this, or you strip out debug symbols, or whatever, you know, like whatever the CI/CD is building and deploying. But then like some change happens to the pipeline, or some change to the format of your comments or whatever changes, and suddenly that protection no longer works. And everybody's just so used to it working, they don't have tests to make sure there's no comments left in the prod code or anything like that, and it makes it out to prod. That's the best faith interpretation of what's going on. I have seen that happen, that whole pipeline happen. But sometimes people just put in code or put in comments because they're used to putting in comments. Maybe they mostly develop compiled languages and they don't know about, you know, reverse engineering. So they leave comments in there. for themselves, and they just don't anticipate somebody trying to take advantage of that information. So it is very much real world. We see this shit all the time. This page, no offense, Ethan, is garbage. This looks awful. This would scream to me that there's a billion vulnerabilities. The WAF is powered by Horde Thrash, which is definitely not a reference to another company that had recent massive outages. But this, like, if I see something like this in real life, and I'm on a pen test, not red team engagement, the first thing I'm going to do is like the bog standard, like, you know, the baby's first SQL injection. This isn't actually, like, I think a lot of people like do something like this, you know, or, you know, various other, whatever your SQL flavor is, however you do the comments or whatever. What I don't like about this is that it can cause problems with, you know, further on down the code. It can cause errors. I like this because you're actually balancing out the quotes of the SQL query itself. And I just find starting with this gives me more success on my first try versus something else. So that's why I do it this way. If you do it the other way, 9 times out of 10 in a CTF, it won't matter. But this is the way I do it. So this was my YOLO. Like, I don't know if this will work, but yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say too that there's a lot of creativity with respect to SQL injection. So there's typically several different ways that you can, you know, kind of get around various things. One of the things I like to do is, you know, if completing the quote doesn't work neatly, you can get away with commenting out the rest of the SQL line, which is also a really fun one to do. So and I see Dead Like You mentioned that on there as well.
Yeah, so that was I had this up a minute ago, but like if you do something like this, or, you know, you do the semicolon dash dash, that's a comment in some SQL flavors. You can also, oh God, what happened? You can also, you know, use the bonus trivia here. This is called an octothorpe. That is the name of this symbol that most people call pound or hash or sharp if you're a musician. But, you know, that works in some flavors of SQL. But yeah, it's commenting out the rest of the SQL line can certainly work. You know, I have run into SQL errors trying to do that. So I do balance.
Absolutely.
I do balance quotes first, and if that doesn't work, then, you know, we just kind of start going down the line. It's really helpful.
Which actually, to digress too, on the error side of things, errors might actually be helpful too.
Absolutely.
In many instances. So that's also something to test for, see what happens when you get an error.
Yep.
Because it may tell you exactly what the query structure is.
100%. I was just about to comment that, like, I think a lot of people learn bog standard SQL injection without ever learning, and they go their entire careers doing this without ever actually learning SQL. And I think that's a massive mistake. Like, you will do okay at medium challenges and less CTFs, and you can probably do a pretty good job as like a medium level or even a senior pen tester without really knowing SQL. But I don't think that you're providing as much value to your customers and your employers as you can if you don't just know. This goes back to like learning the fundamentals, right? If you don't know SQL, then you can't really do SQL injection. You can just my coworkers and I call this incantations. You can cast a spell at a web page, you know the magic words, and you can get a result most of the time. But unless you know SQL, like, you don't understand the deep magic, right? Like you can't make it do what you want it to do. You can only just kind of like hope it gives you what you want. So
for sure.
So
and you can use a lot of that knowledge too to feed back into, you know, your SQL maps or your other tools. Even for blind injections, it's often helpful if you are able to figure out the right, you know, the right structure so that, you know, it works right out of the box and you're not dealing with any unintended effects.
Well, you can't really write like blind binary inference if you don't know SQL, right? Like you can copy someone else's string, but like generally, if you're that deep on SQL injection, like somebody else's string's not going to work there. You need to know, you need to be able to kind of infer what the format of the query is to really pull that off. So yeah, it's super, super important. Plus, like, if you want to be a red teamer, like you want to do adversary emulation, you're writing your own services. Like you're running databases on the back end behind your C2, and you're hardening that C2 and those web servers and like all of this stuff. Like you need to know how to run these services securely. Otherwise, like the blue team or whoever, you know, the opposer in that exercise is going to find your command and control environment and stomp on it. Like you don't want to be that red team, right? So like understanding how all these services work isn't just important for breaking it or for being able to help fix it. Like I do a lot of systems administration and engineering as like a red teamer in my day-to-day job. So, okay, I can put that soapbox away for now. I'm sure we'll get up on it again in a minute, but let's go ahead and run this. And is this a string match, Ethan? Because this was I was not expecting this kind of a response when I did that.
It is, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, generally you'd get at least some kind of format here. But yeah, so we get this. This looks like a flag, and in fact, we kind of anticipated ahead of time that we would get this as a submission a few times, and we definitely did. The important thing to remember is this is this looks like a flag, but if we look at the problems, the flag format for all challenges, but specifically this one, is IWC and then brackets. So this is not a flag, but we can kind of guess that we're on the right track. So I'm just gonna like VI notes, and I'll put this in here. Normally I've got like Evernote or OneNote or Notepad or Cherry Tree or something running in the background. I take all my notes and screenshots of. We're not doing that because this is the walkthrough, but it's good to have notes up. If you're not taking notes, you can run into problems in the future. In fact, my second time playing Net Wars, I realized that not taking notes the first time I played it meant that I had to resolve all of the challenges that I had resolved. And a couple of them I got stuck on, even though I had solved them in the past. So notes are good. Notes are how you learn and how you kind of commit things to memory. Okay, so this is half of it. This is half of what we need. I know that it's half because I've done this before, but you know, like you don't necessarily know this is half, but we know that we have something that looks like it's ciphered or encrypted or encoded in some way. So we need to find something else. We can continue looking through this if we want for completion. There's nothing else really here. Just some, again, bog standard kind of JavaScript and whatnot. So the next thing we do is we go back and we look at the other page. Now, since the first thing I do before any attacking is I look through the entire page, I saw this. I saw that it was very likely dynamically generated content. And this is where I started. And I'll talk about why that was kind of a problem in a minute. But once I walked through the whole kind of website, I looked at this and I said, this is dynamic content. This is kind of where I want to start. Generally static content on a web page, unless, you know, it's a web page, not a web app at that point. So I wasn't really too worried about the other page at first. So again, I Control W or Control U, and I looked at the code. And I'll be honest, that's not actually what I did. I'll show you what I did in a minute. But if we kind of scroll through here, scroll through all the templated stuff, we find, wait, did I scroll past it? Oh yeah, so we find that there is a, oh, I'm looking for the wrong thing. Okay, so we find that there's a link here kind of showing, hey, there's a GraphQL database in the backend, and this is kind of how you get into it. you know, it's running on port 8080, and the kind of rest of that request is v1 GraphQL. I forgot. So there used to be, Ethan talked about before that we had to remove some admin tokens. And so when I tested this challenge beforehand, there was an admin token here. That's what I was looking for. But obviously that had to get removed. So you, like, malicious CTFers couldn't ruin the fun for everybody else. By the way, if you're watching this, one minor soapbox, don't ruin the fun for everybody else. Like, everybody's just here to learn. Like, I've never understood that behavior, but for some reason, some people do. But don't do that. Anyways, what I did is since I wasn't using Burp, I like to have web developer tools open, and you'll notice when I open it, it's like most of the screen, because I almost don't care about what's going on the page at this point. I want to see all of the data. And so you can look at the code this way if you want. If you're doing JavaScript pen testing, you can do custom JavaScript here. You can set your own cookies and whatnot. You can look at the storage and see if there are cookies set. So there, what is this? Oh, this is set by WordPress. You know, if there's cookies like JWTs that you need to brute force or anything like that, you can look at those. But what I like to do, one of the things I like to do is look at this network tab and hit go. And this will show you all of the different requests that your browser makes to build this page. And so as I was looking through that, I noticed that there was another port here, which indicates another service or server. I noticed that it said GraphQL specifically. And if you can click on this, you can actually see information about the requests. You can see the headers that are set. You can see the actual post information itself, any cookies that are set, you know, what information was sent. In this case, the request had JavaScript, what the response data was. So this is what the format of the reply was. So you can look at all that. You can look at it in raw JSON if you want, etc. This was massive. This was the first thing I found when I started this challenge. And this is just a treasure trove of information. So what I did, there's a couple different ways to proceed from here. I know that some people use some GraphQL specific tools. I know that some people, you can, and again, I don't judge this behavior, but I like to do things pretty manually in CTFs, but you can talk to a language model and say, give me a curl command, or give me a command to query GraphQL. There are web pages that will give you like a introspection kind of a command or whatever. What I did was, Burp has some plugins specifically for dealing with GraphQL, things like that. What I did is I wanted to go a little bit more manual. So I looked up, like, I forget what I Googled, but it was something like GraphQL show schema. This was my query right here, actually. So I was like, hey, how do I look for, because in SQL you do something like show databases and then show tables, and then, you know, you've got a bunch of different ways to like get the schema for SQL. I was like, there's got to be some way to do that for GraphQL. So I just started reading documentation. You'll notice the purple links are like the actual GraphQL documentation. I did look at a couple blogs, but go to the source, find out how the source thinks you should be doing things. And then you can, once you understand that, you can start doing funky stuff. But what I did to query this and actually kind of get access to this GraphQL database is I wrote some Python. One is because I do a lot of management these days and I don't get to get my hands dirty a whole lot. So I wanted to reacquaint myself with one of my favorite Python libraries, which is requests. And then the other reason is that since I wasn't using Burp and I wasn't using anything like that, I could just write my own client to query this stuff. We're not here to code review my code or judge me as a developer. I told you I came out of systems administration. I am not a developer, but I threw this together pretty quickly. What it does is it takes some flags, So I can set where the server is. You used to need a token. I am going to make this not required anymore because you don't need a token and you don't need the key. But this used to be part of the challenge before. But it takes a server and then it starts querying. This endpoint. And what I did to keep track of my queries is I just created a different. This says .py, but that's just for importing. But what I did is I created a separate file where I could keep all of my different queries, keep my main code clean, but I can keep different queries to kind of like say, okay, this is how you do one thing, this is how you do another. So the first thing I did was I took the same query, the query that we found right here, this request, got it formatted correctly because it took me a little while to kind of get the formatting and figure out how to actually make a GraphQL query. But this should work. We'll find out here in a second. What is it? Main.py and the S for server. And we're going. It is this, right? Well, I guess the first thing that I did was I did this. Just to kind of see like, hey, can I hit this? And you can. And before you would see a response that was like, you know, expected this token, don't see this token. And that's how I knew I needed a key. But we'll put this in. I need to fix PyCharm. For some reason, my various copy paste doesn't work the way it should. It formats weird. We also don't need HTTP because my program is going to add that. And we should be good to go. So if we run this, let's see if it works. Okay, great. So once I got this, I knew that my program was working. I just got the raw data back, all the menu data back, right? So when we do this, we look at the GraphQL, we look at the response, we look at the raw, and like this matches. I mean, this is just a blob of JSON, but if you did compare these, they're the same. Groovy. Now I know that whatever I'm doing is working, and I can start reading on how to generate my own queries. So the first thing I came up with that I found on the GraphQL Introspection site was this. So I'm going to uncomment that. I'm going to comment this. I'm going to rerun. Now there is a much bigger introspection query that I found later. And this is the get everything of everything of everything. And I'm glad I didn't find this query first because it's way too verbose. In the reading of the documentation, I realized that I just wanted to get the top level. I just wanted the name. I didn't need any other information other than that. So what I ended up getting is just the two objects, what you could think of in SQL as like tables. Now I'm not a GraphQL person. This is literally the first time I've dealt with GraphQL, so I'm going to relate it to SQL because that's what I am more familiar with. But this is essentially the two tables or the objects in GraphQL parlance, I'm pretty sure. So we've already seen menu, and I did do a query to try and see if there was anything else in menu. But if you look at the thing here, you see that it's grabbing ID, name, and price. And if you do this query for menu, like one layer, like if you do this query, but menu instead of Big Boss Notes, yeah. You'll see that there's nothing else in menu. So knowing that there's a different object called Big Boss Notes, I then set out to figure out how I can see the details of that object. And that's this one. I updated it to do the aggregates because I was curious what that was. But if we just get rid of this, then run this command again, we see that there is an ID field. There is a note field, and that's it. We get a little bit more information, like you can see what type, and that's, I think, just a bunch of GraphQL information on the back end that's not very useful for us, but we do see there's an ID and note field. So then I just essentially rewrote the first query to target the boss notes object, and I got the ID and note instead of the ID, name, and price. And we run this, and we see that there is some information here, some closing notes, how to close, and we remember this key for the secret. And so we know that we now have a key. What we had before kind of looked like a flag, but it wasn't a flag. It may have been ciphertext or whatever. Now we have a key. Keys and ciphertext go together like peanut butter and chocolate, or peas and carrots, if you're familiar with that movie. One thing I ran into, Ethan, and I think a couple people ran into this throughout the challenge, is that because I was looking for dynamic content and I started here, I got the key. Now, in testing, this wasn't called remember this is the key for the secret. I think this was just remember the secret or something. And it didn't have the dashes in it. It also didn't have the W or the UKW. So I myself, and I think a couple other people, started trying to jam this as a password in like the WP login screen, which I think we disabled in the full challenge. We, tried to use it to authenticate to the XML RPC endpoint and like all kinds of stuff. So this kind of gives them a background into what writing challenges is like and why it's so important to test things later. And test things multiple times, is because we added, the dashes to show that, hey, these are like different pieces of information. And then we also added this is the key for the secret, to make it clear if you found this first that you're probably looking for a secret somewhere, to kind of help people understand that this isn't the thing you're looking for. This is half the thing you're looking for.
Yep, absolutely. I would say the other cool thing, once we wrap this up, I did want to talk a little bit about GraphQL introspection and kind of how it came about, or at least how I think it came about, and how it's typically used. We use a lot of GraphQL for our kind of web services aspect of what we do. It's very useful. It's a very cool technology. It actually, so you were mentioning the SQL stuff. It is basically a wrapper around the database layer, and it's just an easy way to expose data and make it very dynamic without having to write your own REST API for each object that you want to query for. You can basically, it kind of builds it for you, and you can query for data. And essentially change the query and then change the data that you get on the front end. So it's very powerful. I believe it came out of Facebook and Meta first. They were kind of the pioneers behind it. And then since then it's obviously been proliferated pretty widely.
Yeah. One thing I really like about it as well, in fact, funny story is that like my very first pen test was not really a pen test at all. It was more like an application review. But my very first kind of offensive looking at an application was against like really early GraphQL. And one of the things I liked about it is that you kind of get the dynamic data serving of like direct access to a database without all of the database shenanigans, right? You have to be a lot more explicit with your queries to get back explicit data. And there's not a lot of, I mean, I'm not super familiar with GraphQL, but there's not a lot of like wildcarding or any of like the join shenanigans. Like you've got data, you can query that data, but you can't like programmably like work on that data.
Yeah, it's very useful. It's got like built-in pagination and sorting, filtering, all of that stuff, which is really useful from a data analytics standpoint. And then introspection, what's kind of interesting about that is, as we've kind of evolved in web design over the last several years, discoverable data has really been a big push, in industry, and being able to, without necessarily knowing the schema beforehand, being able to go to a source of data, discover what the data is, and then use it. That's really where GraphQL and where introspection in particular is very helpful, right? Because you can discover the schema through queries and then use that in subsequent queries to gather data.
Yeah.
Which makes it very powerful and very easy to, as data sources evolve and change, you can very easily adapt the front end or any other kind of data analysis back end that you might have to handle that.
Yeah, it's like if people are familiar with writing APIs and stuff, it's like self-documented APIs, right? Like the data or the introspection kind of self-documents the data structure. And since you like assuming that you're only exposing the data that you mean to expose, like it's really not that bad that you expose the schema, because like that's kind of the point of what you're doing, right? You're exposing this data for a reason.
Exactly.
But you just have to be.
Yeah, and you only get in trouble if you are exposing data that you shouldn't be.
exactly, right. And that's that's kind of the, like, I think we get caught up in this. Everything needs to be 100% secure, and as you go through this journey of this wonderful profession we all chose for some reason, you learn that like there's no such thing as 100% secure anything. And so it tends to be a lot of like, well, we have to do this thing that isn't perfect, but as long as you don't do something dumb, it's probably okay. And it's that doing something dumb that I think we get caught up in a lot. Like I do it. It's not something that you have to be dumb to do. You just have to be under a time crunch, or you have to not be paying attention to that particular thing at that particular moment, or your perspective's not right for what you're working on, and you've been like heads down on something else, and all of a sudden you missed something. Like this happens to very smart people every day. But I don't know, things like GraphQL can help a lot. This kind of like wrappers around things can help pare down accidents. Yeah. So we're on kind of the last piece here. So we've got the two halves of what we needed. We found this kind of ciphertext looking stuff, and we found something called a key. So we needed to figure out what to do with this. Now I ran into trouble here because I found the key first. I didn't know it was a key, but also since I did this GraphQL stuff first, I thought that was the easiest part of the challenge, and I started rabbit holing a ton of different stuff. This is more complex. But this is a good reminder that like take breaks, step away from challenges, even if it's, 5 minutes every 30 minutes or 5 minutes every hour or something like that. You tend to get down these rabbit holes when you come back from a challenge or come back from a break. Kind of reassess what you have and like what you've looked at and what you haven't looked at. Take some notes so you know where you were in your rabbit hole, but kind of abandon the rabbit hole, because otherwise, I did this in my OSCP. I got the last flag I needed to pass like 5 minutes before the lab shut down. Like I had just enough time to screenshot and like take a couple notes before like my VPN cut out. And the reason why is I would not let go of rabbit holes. And this is true in professional world too. Like you've got a week or 2 weeks to run an engagement. I can rabbit hole for 3 days and not get anything useful, and that's not helpful to my clients or my employer or my employees even. So kind of detach from rabbit holes. If you're getting stuck, if you're feeling stuck, look at something else. I did not heed my own advice, and I wasted a lot of time trying to find like essentially WordPress days and all kinds of weird fuzzing stuff. But now we've got a key and we've got a ciphertext. This looked interesting to me even before. So before the key looked something like this, and it was like UB, I think, right? And it was like 145 what, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
So like this looked interesting to me because this was kind of like, it looked like a prefix. And I didn't know yet what this was, but it looked like we had kind of two separate strings separated by some numbers to me. So I just Googled this. Now you can Google this. And I say Google even though I don't use Google. I don't know if you caught that, but it's a verb now, whatever. But you can search for this string. If you didn't know what this was, if you're not like a World War II enthusiast or antique crypto enthusiast or whatever, you can Google this, but immediately it comes up with Enigma machines. And if we remember, there's that picture of the Enigma machine on every page. of this site. So this is a part that we didn't really realize was a problem until right before everything went live, and it was too late to redo this challenge. But this is another reason that you test stuff and you go through it and you get multiple people from multiple skill levels to try stuff out, because this site works very well. Decode and a few other sites don't work very well. Part of that problem is this site has a default plugboard configuration and others don't. But it sometimes when you're dealing with ciphers, and this any CTF challenge writing or competing, you need to know some sites have quirks. Some decode sites work really well for some ciphers, and some decode sites work really well for other ciphers. If you're stuck, but you're pretty sure you're doing the right thing, try a different site, ask the organizers, do something and be like, hey, I've spun my wheels on this for a while. I'm almost positive this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Why isn't this working? Can help. So we see that we've got Enigma M3 that matches here. We got UKWB, which matches here. So now we need to figure out how we configure this Enigma machine. So this is our ciphertext here. The next thing we've got is these numbers, and this is actually what clued me into the fact that it was a Enigma machine, is the M3 plus I've got 3 numbers and then a few what are the rotor configurations. I was kind of like 3 numbers plus some letters looks like Enigma to me, but that's just because I do a lot of CTFs. So our rotor configuration is 145. And the position, so this is the kind of what the letters start as. This is like the original, and this is what they decode to. It's funny, if I do enough CTFs, I actually know like what number equates to what letter of the alphabet, just like off the top of my head. And then if I don't do enough CTFs, then I just lose that because it's totally irrelevant information otherwise. And when we do that, we see it looks kind of weird. This is old Cipher analysis format. So what you would do to kind of unjumble ciphertext in your head and just kind of like account for your brain wanting to see patterns and everything is that you would actually separate ciphertext. These curly braces don't actually do anything. As you can see, it didn't fix this at all. But the what you do is you'd separate it out into 5 character chunks, and you would analyze those. You would analyze it this way, so your brain's not seeing patterns that don't exist. So that's why it comes out in this format. But if you get rid of these, you do the IWC. You will see that it comes out to it's dangerous to go alone, drink coffee. It has to all be lowercase because it's Enigma. That's why it didn't have like capitalization or anything like that. Dead Like You points out that you can click the foreign characters stuff so that it will include this for you. That's fine if it helps you with the formatting, but that's not like that was not a feature of the Enigma machine. So I didn't include it. But yes, modern tools does have that ability for you. And I think that's largely just because they know that they're being used in CTFs and stuff. And that is a feature that people need. Okay.
I'll say too, one thing you mentioned that I personally I think is key for having done a lot of CTFs and kind of knowing that this can become an issue is trial and error. Like you said, try different sites, know that you're on the right track, but experiment, because you might find that it's very similar to using different tools. One tool might work better than the others. But it's a good thing to always just do the quick check of every if the first one you pick doesn't work, try the second one, try the third one. And then after doing that, then go back and be like, am I missing something else?
Yeah, it's so like I use decode.fr a lot during CTFs, but like their Enigma decoder like just doesn't work for this because I think they don't have a default keyboard plug board with it. So like, it's once you get here, you're like, okay, I've got ciphertext, I've got a key. I know, I have two pieces of a puzzle. Whether there's more than that, I don't know yet, but like this looks like a flag to me. So I've got two pieces. I know I'm on the right track. I Google this or I Google this. I think you can just Google M3. There's a bit of a name collision with M3. Obviously, there's like the cars and a bunch of other stuff. But so you can Google this whole thing. Once you see that this is literally like comes up as an Enigma machine, you've got an Enigma image on the site. You're doing a CTF, and that's like a trivia encryption device. You should know that you're like where you need to be. It's just finding the right tool that gives you the right output. And like that's a very CTF-y thing, but that's also a very pentesty thing. Like sometimes you're just like, this tool is not doing what I need it to do. I could spend time fixing the tool. I could spend time figuring out why the tool doesn't work, or I could use this other tool that did just work and move on with my job. Unfortunately, in our day jobs, we don't always have the luxury of being able to beat on something just to learn about it or just do it the right way. Sometimes if it works, and you've got to keep pushing. So it is relevant. Any other, I need to step away for like 2 seconds, but any other questions while I'm away, go ahead and put them in chat. Also, Ethan, if there's anything else you wanted to mention, but if you're not part of the Ironwood Cyber Discord, that's where all the badge stuff is happening. So you can check that out. I don't know if we have a link, but we can get a link up. Also, if you check out Ironwood Cyber's Twitter account, you can get to them from there. But check them out if you're going to be at DefCon and you didn't get a badge in the pre-CTF. There will be 2 on-site CTFs that you do have to be local for. You have to be at DefCon for, but you have another chance to win their badges during those. I will be there. Ethan will be there. We love talking shop, obviously. So if there are questions, I'm going to leave the stream up for just a minute. I'll be right back. And if there aren't any questions when I come back, I'll just shut it down. Otherwise, Ethan, if there's some parting words or soapboxes that you want to get on or anything like that, feel free.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to talk about the WAF a little bit, just to clarify. I think somebody had mentioned they'd gotten blocked by it. So the purpose of that, it's your basic rate limiter. So it was, if you try to throw a bunch of requests at the login page, it'll temporarily block you. It basically won't make its way to the SQL engine, the SQL query. So it was really more of a way to, kind of hint, hey, don't just throw stuff at this. Take your time, look at typical payloads for potential SQL injection. Do some testing and you'll get it. So yep, and sorry in advance for the IP rate limiting, but it's definitely good. You'll find this in real engagements too, web application filters or filtering or firewalling in general. The best answer is not always to try to brute force or try to throw everything you've got. That's really the last resort, and often those things can get you either caught or blocked or both, if you're doing a red team engagement. So good to think through what you're doing well in advance to actually doing it, and take a more methodical, deliberate approach first, and then if all else fails, throw the ion cannon at it.
Nice. Yeah, Thomas mentions that I think we called out during the challenge that some people were running Dirbuster or GoBuster or something and were getting blocked. We saw a few people doing that where they were getting they were getting null responses back, but since they weren't paying attention to the tool, they were just waiting for the tool to spit out the answer. I don't think they noticed, but
yeah, if you're getting a 429, which is too many requests from HTTP, just know to stop, because you're not having an effect.
It's funny. Like I use GoBuster sometimes on engagements, especially like pen test, less red team stuff, but like GoBuster, I think, and Dirbuster and Dirsearch and all that stuff, like are kind of the de facto first step of hack the box web challenges. And I wonder if I think people whose primary offensive experience is like hack the box and other CTFs, like overly weight brute forcing in web challenges is kind of a thing to do.
Totally agree. Yeah, it's really important to spend the time looking at the site, understanding if what's the back end content management system. Are there any databases? Do you think is there dynamic content? All that stuff really matters.
Yeah.
And just taking those first steps forward is the most important. And then as you're trying to figure out everything that's on a web server, yeah, directory searching is and file searching is quite helpful.
Yeah.
You'll find some nuggets in there, maybe like a hidden Git repository or a folder that wasn't apparent from the sitemap and stuff like that. But this challenge was really meant to highlight that of use what's in front of you, take methodical steps forward. Don't throw the can, don't fire the cannon off the bat. Take your time.
Yeah, I will say that using the web application's contents to find services and ports that I then interrogate directly, I use a lot more on engagements than directory brute forcing. I feel like directory brute forcing is kind of a completion thing. It's like we did everything we needed to do. Let's see if there's any extra nuggets. Like, oh, by the way, you're exposing way too much information because this document repository has directory listing enabled or something like that. Rarely does it like kick open, like turn over the rock that like makes the engagement a success. It does happen. Don't get me wrong. Like it's, it does, but it's more of a, here's the completeness of the report than a, like, this is the crux of the problem.
Yep, for sure. And yeah, I see Thomas. Yes. So our challenges will be fairly late at night. Just keep track of our X account. We'll post, we'll post the time, location, all of that good stuff. We also talked a little bit about it last night on Discord, but the format will be a little bit different from what we did here, which this was more of kind of Jeopardy style of you can pick which challenge you want to try first. The ones at the con will be in serial fashion, so they will kind of build on each other as you go, which is quite fun. We typically blend in some location based challenges as well. So
I mean, maybe because I was listening to that conversation, it's not going to be as widespread as the last one, right? Like, I feel like the last one, they had to go to, like, sometimes they had to go to pretty wide geographically dispersed locations. This will be a little more local, right?
It should be. I will admit I'm in the blind. I haven't worked on the challenges for this, so I have no pertinent information to give with respect to what they might be. But yeah, I think we'll be cognizant of that. The other cool thing, the other new thing that we're doing this year, which I personally we're really happy about, is we're going to do so obviously we'll have placed badges. So the first X number of people to get the challenge fully solved will get a badge. But we'll also, for the folks that stuck around that at least solved one of the problems, and stuck around for the rest of it, you know, learned some new things, all that good stuff. We're also raffling off and no price or no admittance to that is paid at all. It's a free raffle, but we're going to have a selection of badges that are kind of randomly chosen for those that didn't get one. So really the intent is to have you come out, have a good time, learn some new things,
meet some people,
you know, kind of foster all the stuff that we got out of the community coming into it for, you know, for the first time and, you know, and subsequent times. So yeah,
absolutely. Well, this went a little over time. I was hoping it'd be 2 hours. We're at 2.5. If there are more questions, feel free to reach out to Ethan or I, either in Discord or on in the public channels, whatever. We love talking about this stuff. Come see us at DEF CON, absolutely. But otherwise, Ethan, thanks so much for hanging out, man. I know that you guys are super busy trying to get everything ready for a week from now. So like there's probably less like last minute stuff y'all have to do. But this was great. We need to do some co-streaming again. This was fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a blast. Thanks to everybody that watched and commented, asked questions. It was a blast.
Yeah. Thanks so much. The participation is why we do it. I mean, we'd probably still make challenges for each other, but if we didn't have this community and people participating and you know, learning stuff, then there wouldn't be a point to running CTF. So thank you everybody for being around and participating and asking questions and competing, because that's why we're here. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time.